Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Christina. I am a naturopath, nutritionist, GAPS practitioner, life coach, and carnivore. And I have been carnivore now for nearly 100 days. I'm coming up to my 100-day mark in about 2 days, I think, off the top of my memory. I'm pretty close. And I have been sharing my journey with carnivore for the last couple of months on my Facebook page, on my Instagram, and I've had a whole heap of people that are interested in what's going on for me and how I'm doing it and what's happening within my body and the changes, etc., etc. And along that journey, I'm having people ask me questions. And one of the questions that often gets asked when it comes to people looking at what I'm doing with carnivore is, what about constipation? Do you get constipated? If you don't have enough fiber in your diet, do you get constipated? And we have this story that in order to poo, you actually need to use fiber, which I personally as a practitioner have known is a myth for a really long time. I've taken people through the GAPS protocol where we take out a lot of that fiber because it's actually damaging the gut, and it's actually, causing some inflammation and causing some of that damage that's happening. So for example, if you've got ulcerative colitis, for example, then we want to remove that fiber because that fiber is going to be damaging to your gut, and especially when it's inflamed. If you're going through a flare-up, then fiber can start to cause, microabrasions on the actual lining of the gut, which then will lead to even more leaky gut and more problems. And so I've known that fiber has not actually been a necessity for life for a really long time. And I know that taking that out for a lot of people actually creates better results for them, that their body gets better, that they start to heal, that their digestive system gets a rest, and it's actually great from that perspective. And so when I got to that point of what about fiber? Because we're not eating any plants, except for maybe some herbs, if you're including herbs in your protocol, then you don't have a whole lot of fiber. And so when I got that question, I had to smile to myself because it just reminds me of the myth that you have to have fiber in order to poo. Now, ultimately, the truth is, if you have to have fiber in order to poo, what's actually happening there is that your bowel muscles aren't being utilized. They actually aren't working the way that they should be working. So if you imagine that you've got this big giant tube that's in your body, and from the moment you put food into your stomach, it sits there, it gets churned up, the stomach turns it all over, and then it goes through into the small intestine, and then into the large intestine, and then into the bowels, and we poop it out. Now, how it travels down that pathway is meant to be through the motion of peristaltic muscles. So muscles that do this squeezing motion. So this one squeezes, and then the next one squeezes, and it just keeps moving it down the line as that squeezing process happens. Now, that's what's actually meant to make your poo and make you actually, not have constipation and have it easy. Now, there is another element in this, and that is fat. If you are not consuming enough fat, then that bile from the gallbladder is not going to be released, and that bile from the gallbladder kind of lubricates the digestive system to make this motion happen much more easily. Now, the other thing that happens when we have this peristaltic motion is, if you can imagine that my hand has villi and then microvilli on it. Now, on those microvilli are things like enzymes, and we have transporters. So the transporter takes some of the food from the digestive system that's been broken down into amino acids, into fats, into, vitamins and minerals, that's been broken down into those components, and it actually takes them and it pulls it into the bloodstream. So then it can be transported around the body to actually nourish all of the different organs within the body. Now, when this movement happens, it gets in contact with as much of that chyme, which is what food is called once it moves through the digestive system somewhere along the line, and doesn't really get labeled poo until it starts to move into the bowel. And so the chyme, through this process, the microvilli and the villi squeeze onto that as it's doing that process, and more of those villi and microvilli actually get in contact with the chyme or the food that you've put in, and actually can pull the nutrients out and bring them across into the blood pathway, where it is then transported around to the rest of the body. Now, if you are using fiber to make that happen, so your muscles aren't doing this process, or they're doing it really minimally because the fibre is pushing that poo through that digestive system, what's happening is you are getting less and less of those nutrients, because you're not getting this beautiful, powerful movement that our muscles actually make. And when they make that movement, the villi and the microvilli contact with the actual particles of what we've put in and pull it across. So when we're not doing that, we're not getting as much of that transition happening as well. So we're not getting as much of that movement happening as well. And so what's happening is, while we're putting this fibre in and we're pooping, we're also losing nutrients as well. So we're not getting as much bang out of the buck that we're putting in. We're putting in beautiful, organic, biodynamic, and all of the different words of those foods. There's a lot of fibre in there, and that fibre is what's being used to make you poo. Then it's actually not helping you. You're not getting all of the nutrition out of that. And so when we come across this myth that you have to have fibre in order to poo, there's multiple different things there. One of which is, most likely, if you have to have fibre for you to poo, then your muscles have atrophied. They're not as strong and robust as they normally were or could be or should be. And you may not be having enough fat. And so those are the two things that I actually talk with my clients about when it comes to constipation, and when it comes to this thought that we need to have fibre in order to poo. Now, I'm not saying that we couldn't have some fibre if we chose to have some fibre. And I certainly have clients who have done carnivore for a period of time, they've hit their goals, and then they want to actually start to include a little bit of fruit and a little bit of vegetables that are lower in those plant toxins, and then create a little bit more of a diet out of that. And they are doing beautifully on that. But it first comes back to, we've got to heal those muscles, we've got to nourish them. So if they've not been working properly, we've got to give them the food that they need to actually nourish. Now, part of that is, you might start your carnivore diet or your GAPS diet or whatever protocol you're actually utilizing, whether it be hypercarnivore, etc., or ketovore. You might start by utilizing meats that have been well broken down. So that might be slow cooked meats versus just a quick steak that's been fried on the grill. You might want slow cooked, falling off the bone, lamb shanks, or ossobuco, or anything else that's been really slowly braised in its own juices. Now, there's a double benefit there, as you get the beautiful L-glutamine, which is in the liquid. So if you put lamb shanks into a crock pot and you then add some water to that, at the end of it, some of the amino acids are actually going to make their way into the water, and that's going to be packed full of L-glutamine. Now, L-glutamine is the nutrient that actually heals the gut cells. So, for example, we have enterocyte cells which line our gut, and those enterocyte cells, they themselves only take one nutrient from the digestive system. Everything else they pass through, put it into that bloodstream so it can be transported to the rest of the body. The only thing that they take is L-glutamine. That is their food. It's the thing that makes them healthy, robust, being able to do their job really, really well. And so that broth is actually going to contain that L-glutamine, which is packed full of that nutrient that helps those cells get stronger, gets more robust, and helps to heal things like leaky gut. Now, I want to be clear that happens in meat broth, where we take the meat that might be on a bone, put it in a slow cooker with some water. That liquid that is at the end of that cooking process is meat broth. Bone broth is something different. Bone broth is where you take all the meat off the bones, and then you put that in some water, and you maybe add a little bit of apple cider vinegar or some lemon juice or some type of vinegar to activate it. And what you're going to get there at the end of that cooking process is known as bone broth. Now, bone broth is really good for increasing minerals and rebuilding minerals within your body, but it doesn't have as much of that L-glutamine. So if you have gut issues, then that L-glutamine is the actual food that you want to be consuming more of in order to heal that at a faster rate and to nourish those cells so that they can do that job of the peristaltic motion and the enterocyte cells to be really strong and reduce things like leaky gut. Now, the other aspect that I usually talk about is having enough fat. Now, it's one of those things that more often or not, when I'm looking at somebody's diet, I'll actually find that they're not consuming enough fat. And if you've got constipation, then you probably are not having enough fat. And I'm just saying, generally speaking, because I would need to actually look at things to give you a more specific answer to that. But If you've got constipation, then you're probably not having enough fat. The other thing that could be there is that your magnesium is low. So in order for your muscles to actually do this motion, we actually need to nourish them. And one of those big nutrients that they tend to be lacking in order to be strong and robust is magnesium. And so from the carnivore perspective, the way that we would fill that magnesium up might be with some electrolytes or some particular keto salts, etc. But it might also be utilizing things like heart organ meat. So heart organ meat is actually particularly high in magnesium, as well as a whole bunch of other nutrients as well. But that one is often one of the easier organ meats to come at, because unless you've cut it up, you don't really know that it's actually an organ, because it looks very much, well, it has a very taste very similar to things like a steak, because essentially a steak is a muscle meat, heart is a muscle meat as well, but it is one that is high in a really good balance of magnesium, potassium, sodium, etc., to help you actually nourish and rebuild and get your cells and your muscles working really well again. So there's my answer to the fiber question. If you do have any other questions, I would love to hear them, and I would love to do a little bit of a video on them, and of course talk about my journey as well. So I'll come back when I've really officially hit, I think it's on Friday, I officially hit the 100 days, and I'll come back and do a little bit of a debrief of like my first 100 days and share that with you. All right, that's it for me today. I hope you have the most amazing day ever, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. See you later.